What's up? It's Andrew from Rip to Shreds, and today we're comparing 5 mixes of a death metal song by 5 different professionals at 5 different price points. The song is Feast of the Deceased off the newest Rip to Shreds record, Sanchi, that was released by Relapse Records last year. This time our mixers are Jens Bogren from Sweden, most well known for being Opeth's longtime producer and engineer. His credits are a who's who of modern metal: Arch Enemy, Behemoth, Trivium, and more. Dave Otero from Colorado. He has a wide range of very slickly produced credits with Archspire, Aborted, and Cattle Decapitation, but also more grimy and dirty sounds with Primitive Man or Wake. Dan Swano from Sweden. The main man behind death metal band Edge of Sanity, Swano has also been running Unisound Studios for almost 30 years now. Also responsible for producing and engineering classic records by Dawn, Dissection, Catatonia, and more. We've got Greg Chandler from the UK, the owner of Priory Studios in Birmingham, and he also sings and plays guitar for funeral doom band Esoteric. His credits include Cathalist, Cruciamentum, and Ashenspire. Last we have Damien Herring from Horrendous, who does have a bit of a home ground advantage as he mixed the first Rip to Shreds record and he's mastered all the rest, including this record. He's mixed stuff for Blood Incantation, Prosanctus Inferi, and Void Ceremony. And of course, we have myself. Now, these price points are rough estimates without fees or taxes for the year 2025, and will certainly change with inflation and demand. I myself had to increase my prices twice this last year. These are also for very simple guitar, bass, and drum arrangements without any choirs or synths. Higher track counts are more expensive, and single mixes are a lot more expensive than a full album. You can go on Swano's website right now. He has an up-to-date price calculator. It would be about $2,600 USD to mix a 40-minute album compared to the $800 I paid him for this mix. I've never seen a budget for an album by someone like Behemoth, but I would be surprised if Bogren charged them more than $10,000 to mix a whole album. Okay, these are the multi-tracks everyone had to work with. If you want to download them and try mixing the song yourself, you can check the Bandcamp link in the description down below, where I've hosted these multi-tracks for free download. But even though I have Relapse's approval to release them, they can't be used for commercial purposes. Let's check out how my mix sounds first, as a reference to compare all the other mixes against. All of these are level matched as best as I can. I think that sounds pretty good. I think Damien and I did a pretty damn good job. Let's see what Bogren did with the intro of the song. So the first thing that I noticed, the very first draft that Bogren gave me, there was basically no HM2 in the guitars. So I asked him to go back and either blend my original guitar tracks back in more or use a plugin that had more HM2 in it. And out of all the rhythm guitars on his sound the least HM2, I guess. He is definitely not a stranger to the HM2 sound. What stood out to me when I first started communicating with Bogren, he instantly grasped the necessary vocal effects that took me maybe a whole bunch of back and forth with all the other mixers to get in the right place. When he gave me the mix, I was like, okay, it sounds fucking sick. I just need this change. Came back with a revision with more HM2 in it, and I was like, I mean, that's just fucking it. And when you work with him, it's obvious that he's a total fucking professional. I would say the snare, there's very little snare room sample. I also want to say there's not much going on in the overheads either. Sounds like a very compressed snare. I don't know if he put another sample on top of the snare that, it doesn't sound quite like my original one. And the kick, I'm pretty sure the kick is a totally different sample. but there's just like this very, very even balance across everything. Nothing feels out of place. The low end is really big and fat. It's everything you might expect from a pro. Okay, let's look at Otero. First off, his guitars are obviously a lot nastier and sharper in the highs than Bogren or mine. I believe I had to go a little bit of back and forth with Otero about the amount of vocal effects, but he went pretty over the top. The first version came to me like it didn't have quite enough, and then so I was like, hey, can you go more over the top? And then you've got all these crazy bouncing things, and they're all super, super fucking clear. Something I struggle with a lot when I mix. If I have some crazy delay throw with vocals, it's very easy for them to get lost. And it's easy for them to sound either indistinct or too loud. Otero gets it just right. When I listen to the blast beat, I want to say that I'm 90% sure the kick and the snare were totally sampled or replaced. The kick has that typical tech death kind of typewriter sound. Already we see a really big difference in vibe between Bogren and Otero's and mine. I feel like Otero's vibe fits a little more what I'm looking for so far. So let's look at what Dan Swano did. So when you contact Swano to have something mixed, he insists on having a complete reference. So he doesn't want you to say, okay, I want the guitars from X record, but the drums from Y record, and the vocals from Z record. I also know from personal experience, it's really difficult to work with those kinds of instructions. So he tells you, give me your ultimate metal production, and I will make it sound like that, and the choices that you guys made during recording will make it end up sounding different than whatever that other record is. So of course I told him, okay, just make it sound like Left Hand Path. And the fucking guitars, man. What really stands out to me about the Left Hand Path guitar sound, if you've watched my LHP recreation video, very scooped, very buzzy. The HM2 naturally has a shit ton of information around the 1200 hertz range. It's just totally scooped out on Left Hand Path. They didn't do that on like Clandestine or Everflowing Stream or a bunch of the other Sunlight Studio albums. It's just Left Hand Path. That's super scooped and buzzy. Swano did exactly that. Another thing that stands out to me, there's a lot more of the center guitar that the other guys have turned down a little bit. The vocals here are like the most old school sounding with very obvious reverb. So it's not like Bogren or Otero's vocals are dry. They're just not obviously wet. You can hear the tail on the vocals going off. Greg Chandler. So far, I think his drums sound the most natural to me, as in, I don't think he added any samples, or if he did, they're pretty subtle. First few versions, the vocal effects were pretty conservative. With a little back and forth, we got them up to this nice, super over-the-top, big crazy delay throws and reverse reverb and reverse delay. All of it is super clear, which I really like. I'm almost certain that snare is just exactly the snare that I sent him. Sounds like it's slamming maybe an API or 1176 compressor pretty hard. The differences between all these mixes are a lot more subtle than the differences in my previous video, because if you went between Blues and Marston and Taylor Young's and Lowndes, those are all like super different. And these are all, they made slightly different artistic choices. On a technical level, they're all doing very similar things. It's really hard to express a preference for any of these. Such a personal preference thing at this point. Let's see what Damien did. That's actually really similar to Chandler's. Let me go back and forth. Maybe Damien's has a little bit more reverb on the vocals, and the guitars feel like they have a little bit more width in the low mids. And the snare is... The snare sits back just a little bit more in Damien's version. I want to say those two are like functionally identical. So at this point, I want to say Greg and Damien have done very similar things. Swano, obviously his guitars are totally different from everyone else's because he consciously chose to make it sound as close to Left Hand Path as he possibly could, which means it's going to be a lot more scooped and a lot buzzier than everyone else. So Swano, Greg, and Damien all have relatively more old school sounds with a lot more reverb on everything. And both Otero and Bogren went for a more modern and drier style with less obvious reverb. And the difference between Otero and Bogren, I want to say Otero is more aggressive. So the big difference between the guitars for those two, Bogren's guitars have like a peak in the mid-highs, and Otero chose to have his guitars a little more emphasizing the low mids. Divide it up into Bogren and Otero, modern sounding, Swano, Greg, and Damien, old school sounding. Okay, so these vocal tracks were recorded with a Shure SM7, and when we listen to them,
it's all I know. See, listen, violent. What's my dad?
You can hear that Mike's voice is a lot stronger in the mid-highs, while mine has a lot more low mids. So it's going to be a challenge to properly balance my vocals against his. With these lead guitars, if I remember right, I reamped Mike's with the 6505 back there, and mine that Mesa Mark IV. Oh, first we've got bass. So this is just Ryan's DI track. I provided them the DI track. In my own mix, I worked off of this DI going through STL Tone Hub plugin, I believe the Kurt Ballou pack, and I'm pretty sure all the mixers also ran the DI bass through some kind of amp sim. For the rhythm guitars, I bust the main stereo guitars into a single stereo file. And the way we recorded this album, me and Mike, we split up all the songs. So I recorded 5, he recorded 5, and we did all the rhythm guitars for each of our songs. So this one, Mike recorded all the rhythm guitars. And my production inspiration for this record was Left Hand Path, but maybe a more smooth and refined version. The guitars were this Boss HM2 into this Decibelix HM2 clone, and that went straight into a power amp and out to my Marshall cabinet. And like Left Hand Path, I have a third sounder guitar. And that is this Ampeg VH140C in a pedal clone. I high-passed it pretty strongly to give some space for the snare and the kick. Whenever there was a harmony, we recorded third and fourth guitar with the VH140C and panned them about 30 to each side. I did provide DI files to Bogren and Swano at their insistence, but not to the other guys because I wanted them to work off the tone I had. Now, when it comes to the drums, the kick on Jubian was fully sample replaced, so I wanted to make a point of using as much natural kick for this record as I could. I used an Audix D6 pointed directly at the beater inside of the drum. And that also has kick sample blended in about 30% to give it some extra smack. This is already pre-processed with noise gate. I used Wilkinson depleter and also Sound Radix drum leveler. The snare is my Black Beauty. I would say like a medium-ish tuning, and I bussed together all the mics to commit to the sound. On the top, there is a Shure Beta 98 condenser and a Grinelli 57, and then there's a regular 57 on the bottom for the snare wires. And there is a bit of snare sample blended in to help reduce the amount of bleed by increasing the signal to bleed ratio, but not so much that you're actually hearing the actual tone of the sample. And I also split up the snare track into two. One just for regular snare backbeats, and one specifically for only blast beats. Because you hit the snare a lot softer when it comes to a blast beat, I wanted to make sure that any processing I did to the snare would be consistent, whether it's the backbeat or a blast, and I would have a way to adjust the snare level during all blast beats across the entire album with just one knob. Quiet snare blasts drive me insane. Overheads. Mic Tech C5's Space Bear configuration. I used a 21-inch Rude Crash and a 16-inch Rude Crash, the K-Custom dark hi-hats, and the Pasty 2002 ride. Hi-hat and ride were mic'd up separately, I believe, with my old Samson CO2s. And the tom mics are a 57 clone. Okay, let's take a look at the chorus, because I think everyone did slightly different things. So first, mine for reference. Sounds pretty good, if I do say so myself. Bogren's chorus. Maybe the separation between my voice and Mike's is a little bit muddled. Let's look at Otero's chorus. Otero did something really cool here. I don't know if he used a stereo widener plugin or if he just copy pasted one of the takes of the chorus from later on in the song and brought it back to this part, panned them for that stereo effect. But I really like that. It sounds super cool, and it's not something I would necessarily have thought of doing. Like for heavy metal stuff, clean singing stuff, I'm all for double tracking, triple tracking the vocals. When it comes to death metal, it just never enters my mind. And something different here, I kind of like how on the stab in the he totally cuts off that reverb tail there. Whereas you can hear the reverb tail on the vocals. Beast trails off into the double bass part coming back. Bogren also lets it trail off. So I thought it was kind of cool that Otero decided to have like a hard stop before everything comes back in. Swano's chorus. When my vocals and Mike's are stacked, Mike's pokes out a little bit more. And I can't get enough of that fucking left-hand path guitar sound, man. I don't think there's any like particularly over-the-top vocal effects on the chorus here. Let's look at Greg's. The reverse reverb on the Feast. Again, it's another thing that I would not normally ever think to do on my own. Damien's chorus. Maybe Mike's voice gets a little bit lost on the chorus. Let's look at some of the ways that we treated tom hits, cymbal grabs. So again, starting from mine as a reference. This is Bogren. Cymbals in general are like pushed back a bit in Bogren's version, and his toms are obviously more up front. Sounds like there's an explosion of sub, like he put a bass drop in there or something. Otero. I feel like Otero also sample replaced the toms, because there's so much low end. But however he treated the toms, I think they sound super cool. A Swano. Whenever you mix drums, especially for extreme metal, you always got to find that balance between hi-hat and everything else, especially if you have a very heavy-handed drummer just bashes the shit out of hi-hat. Luckily, Brian is great. He doesn't do that. That hi-hat there is perfect. That's what really stands out to me about Swano's part right there. All right, let's look at Greg's cymbal crashes and tom hit. Again, there's like so much fucking low-end information in those toms. His cymbal grabs are pretty far up front. Like mine. Bogren's is a bit more back. Otero's is pretty up front. Swano's is... Maybe it's just Bogren who's very laid back with the cymbals. I think he did mention to me that maybe some of the cymbals were a little hard to work with. He spent some more time on them than he normally did. And I guess maybe the other dudes were just like, fuck it. It's just the way it sounds. Leave it. Leave it in. Let's look at Damien. And Damien's toms are also really loud. Part of it was a confidence issue on my own part, where I was like, I'm not sure that I've tuned the toms and made them sound as good as I possibly could have. So I mixed them a little further down to try and kind of bury that shittiness. And the other dudes were like, sounds fine, bro. We're just going to turn it up. Might also be a bit copium. Let's have a look at the solos. Again, mine for reference. Bogren's solo section. My leads sound a little thinner. Bogren definitely smoothed out some of the spikiness in the lead sound. That's the first thing that jumps out to me. For Otero. Otero has a little bit more clarity on the rhythm guitars. Like, I can hear the harmonies a little bit more clearly as the lead is going. That's what's jumping out at me. And for Swan... his leads are obviously a lot less wet than any of the others so far. The way that he treats individual cymbal spot mics, that ride is just coming in super, super clear. Oh, I had it pretty loud. Okay, Bogren pushed it down. Otero had it pretty loud. Yeah, I just fucking love the vibe of Swanos. Greg's solo section. I think Greg's leads sound a little bit more wet, at least more wet than Swano's. It's a pretty fucking subtle difference here. Let me listen to Damien's. Okay, so Damien's is clearly the most wet out of all the leads. I also like how clear the rhythm guitars are underneath Mike's solo here. These are all pretty fucking subtle differences. I mean, they're big differences when you listen to it critically like this. I don't know how big they are if you aren't as like fucking close to the music and have lived with these mixes for months like I have. Okay, let's look at the blast beats, because blast beats are super fucking important to me. All right, starting again from mine as a reference. When I'm looking for a blast beat, I want something with very defined snare hits. It drives me crazy when the snare in a blast beat is soft or quiet. I know George Kleiss is an amazing drummer. I know he can hit that snare super fucking hard. For whatever reason, on Annihilation of the Wicked, his snare is like turned way down on the blast beats, and that just drives me crazy. So I want it loud. I want PLF trinitro toluene negation. No, you can hear Fajardo's snare tuned high, goes pep, 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 and it's so loud. So that's what I'm looking for. Because this is death metal, I mixed it a little bit more conservatively than I do for, Hokugo Grind Time or anyone who comes to me with like a grindcore thing. I need that snare loud. Let's listen to Bogren's blast beat. So here I do have to ding Bogren a little bit because of his heavy sample usage. The blast beat here sounds a little too drum machine for my liking. Something about it just doesn't sound totally convincing. For Otero, Otero's definitely sounds more natural, but he's also turned down the snare quite a bit. So it's more heavy on the kick in the blast beat. And I mean, kick heavy blast beats can sound cool, but I'm a snare guy. Swano's blast beat. Sounds fucking great to me. It's well balanced between kick and the snare. I'm sure he put some kind of sample on it to tweak it more towards his liking, but it doesn't sound unnatural. Sounds fucking sick. All right, Greg's blast beat. First off, love that slate, that extra delay throw. Maybe there's a touch too much reverb on the blast section. I automate down the snare reverb whenever there's like a big fill or blast beats. But I like the balance between the kick and the snare. It sounds natural, it sounds aggressive. Damien's blast beat. Damien's also sounds great. His snare in general had less reverb than everyone else's. That was always going to sound a little drier, maybe a little bit more natural to my ears. And let's look at the end of the song. Mine first as a reference. Here, what I'm really looking for, I need really exaggerated reverb on the snare, and I need my lows at the end of the section to really feel like it's shaking your chest. All right, let's listen to Bogren. Love the reverb, love the vocal effects that he threw on there. Probably should have told him, put a touch more reverb on the snare at this part, but sounds great. Okay, Otero. You hear that? He put another delay on the feast, so it's like kind of thing. I think he didn't put so much reverb on the snare hit here as like a room sample that sounds like kind of crushed to me. I love the vibe. It sounds super sick. Swano. Am I deaf? Did everyone just leave out the... Hold on. I mixed that lead super low. Everyone else mixed it super low. Swano brought it up. I don't know how I forgot I did that. Until now. Love the way it sounds. Love the fat snare here. Let's look at Greg. Yeah, Greg's sounds like it's in a fucking cavern. Reverb on the snare is perfect. Let's check out Damien. So I love that little triple yeah right there. I probably should have told him to put more reverb on the end. Again, that's my miss. Generally, if like some kind of special effect is missing that you were looking for, usually it's the client's fault for not speaking up and being like, hey, forgot to mention this, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, this one also sounds fucking sick. So what is my conclusion from this? Obviously, this really is going to come down to your personal preference of what kind of vibe you're looking for in your mix. I'm not sold on price necessarily being directly correlated to quality. I think a big part of price is mostly down to how in demand you are. I'm not trying to say Bogren isn't amazing at what he does. He is. But you're also going to be able to get a competitive result from someone who doesn't cost as much as Bogren, depending on the vibe that you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for something that sounds exactly like Opeth, you may not get that from a Greg Chandler or a Dan Swano. You probably need to go to Bogren. Because what I'm doing here is old school death metal. Bogren and Otero are both much more modern producers. So from the start, they were already operating at a bit of a disadvantage in that this isn't going to be their stylistic forte to make something sound underproduced. Especially Bogren, right? He's used to working with bands that want to be a bit overproduced. And I think to a certain extent with Otero with his tech death clients. So I think both of them did really amazing mixes. They sound great. It's just not necessarily the style that I'm looking for. If I had to pick a winner, I'll probably just say Swano. I fucking love Left Hand Path. You can't beat the Left Hand Path HM2 sound, and he like nailed it to a T. But that's just a preference standpoint. I like that kind of guitar sound, and he made it sound really like that guitar sound. I did consciously, on the record, try to make it sound a little bit less like Left Hand Path than I could have. I didn't want the whole album to be like that much of just like a ripoff of Left Hand Path. In like a single track shootout like this, I would pick Swano's just because it sounds exactly like Left Hand Path. But I might not end up doing that for the full album because then it's like, it's too much. Maybe this is a bit of demo-itis. From that perspective, I would still just go with my own mix. It just has the little details that I'm looking for. Though, of course, I kind of wish I had done this before I had shipped my mix off to Relapse, and maybe I could have taken little bits of things I liked about the other mixes and incorporated them into mine. Because the previous mix video, those were done kind of as a learning exercise all the way back when Jubian was released. So those were done like 3 years ago. And I felt like I learned a lot of lessons from those that I could apply to this new record. I should definitely have turned the kick up more on this record. And maybe spent a little bit more time on the blast beats. That's like my main takeaways from this. So what do you guys think? Which mix did you guys like the best? If you want to mix it yourself and see what you come up with, remember, check the link in the description. My Bandcamp, theweebdungeon.bandcamp.com. You can download all the multi-tracks for free, mix it yourself. And if you want to take a little bit more of a leisurely listen between each of the mixes, right here, it should pop up now. There is a link to a video where it's just each of the mixes, one after the next, with no other commentary. That's all I have for today. So everyone, eat ass, blast fast, and peace.